Hi, everybody. My name is Regina Gloria. I'm the Director of Education here at Ragdale. Thanks, everyone, for spending some time this morning joining us in this conversation featuring one of our 2020 Ragdale in Schools Fellows, Kenny Nguyen. As you know, we're going to be presenting these every Friday throughout the summer. We actually have another one, a second one at 1 o'clock. So stay tuned for that this afternoon. Everything will be free and available online as well afterwards. I'm very pleased to introduce Kenny Nguyen, who was in residence earlier this year, just before the pandemic hit. And Kenny, I think you were gone off to Iceland for another residency when that was cut short. But I'm glad you're back and safe in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where Kenny resides or has been living since 2010 as a full-time artist and lecturer. He's in his studio working today, and that's where we'll be visiting, staying prolific and working on new mixed media paintings and sculptures, which we'll be talking about in a minute. Kenny's work explores personal identity, integration, and cultural displacement. He was born and raised in South Vietnam and went to Vietnam National University of Art and Architecture, where he received his BFA in fashion design, and was actually an assistant fashion designer in Ho Chi Minh City before he moved to the US, and then got another degree at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. And as I mentioned briefly, he's attended many residencies all over the world, aside from Ragdale, and has a long list of accolades and exhibited all over the place, including South Korea, Georgia, Florida, Texas, DC, and California, to name a few. So Kenny, it's great to have you back. Good to see you.
Well, thank you so much, Regent. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for Ragdale staff who put up this Arctic talk, so we have time to reconnect with all of you. And I see some faces from the Ragdale staff. Say hi. And also some of my residency friends from other residencies. Well, so today I'm sitting here at my studio in Charlotte, and it's just, kind of like a garage space studio at my house. I will try to keep the talk kind of short, and they're gonna have some time for the questions. And first of all, when I approached to this kind of project to making kind of like sculptural painting, maybe a textile piece. Not sure what to call it yet, but the material I think is the core of all of these COPs, and the fact that I call it COPs. So the most question that I got from all the audience, all the viewers is why do I judge the materials, and what is really meaning for me. And I think that's really explaining the first step to understand the artwork that I've been making. And also, it's important for myself too. So I have a brief time working in fashion design for like 2 or 3 years. And I have been working a lot with fabric and all the textiles making productions. I think most of the time, when the artists say, oh, they chose the material to work it with, but I think the material that chose me, and in that way, because no matter what I do, I'm working with textile, working with fabric, and now I bring back this material into a painting, sculpture practice. So to me, it just, the fascinating with the traditional art in Vietnam, where they're making silk painting, and then I also work in fashion design. It's all that linked back to silk. So when I moved to the United States, I'm very like always thinking about how to use all that I've been learning and making in Vietnam into my art practice here. And by exploring the material that's so familiar with me and so familiar with the cultures, it's also a challenge. They make it into a kind of perfection with material. So the first of all come to my mind, there's nothing else to do with it. And the fact that I've been sitting in my studio for hours and thinking, you know, how do I make it different? How do I make this material become my material in particular, and it hold a meaning that I can use to introduce to the viewers. So most of these CPs that I make is process based, and is you know, the fabric have been manipulated, have been cutting, tearing, deconstructions, and then I reconstruct them back on the surface. So it's been a long process to take me into this point, to making all these kind of sculptural form of it. Some other technical issue that I have been found, but foremost the historical meaning of the seal itself. So by using the materials as a means of client abstract communication, first of all, I think when you approach this piece, so this is one of the sample. That's one piece that I just made in my studio about a couple of weeks ago, and I still kind of manipulated, still kind of sculpting it a little bit on the wall to see how it looked like. So the first approach on these seal piece, I really want the viewer drawn into what the material they've been making. And because it's a construction abstract, so there's no really a representation image or any source of images that people can relate to. So then the material, I think, is spoken the most in all these pieces.
Kenny, I don't mean to interrupt you too many times here, but I do want to know a little bit more about, if you could just explain to us a little bit more of the technique, because it does look like obviously textiles and such, but I remember when you were at Ragdale, you were talking a lot about not using a brush, like a typical painting, and you had even demonstrated to me how many torn pieces. So if you could just give us a brief, or get into it as much as you want, the technical aspects of how those things are made, especially that one behind you.
Absolutely. So all these CPs was reconstructed from deconstruct a bunch of fabric. So I've been, in my studio, and just the same action every time I cutting every single strap of silk. So by the way, this is the silk that I've been working with, and very thin, and kind of like you can kind of see through it. So basically, I use the paint to dye in this material and attack them back on the canvas. So the first step I would do is just cut these kind of like silk fabric into a very thin, small strap of silk, and then I soak them in paint, and then I attack them back on the canvas. So it's the same actions, of cutting and then dipping it in paint and then weaving it in the canvas. So there's no kind of like weaving methods being used here, but the actions is actually is kind of like similar with a weaver who weaving every single thread into the whole piece of fabric. And that's what the time that it really, for me, to self-reflect, is self-reflections, is also kind of like meditations for me to do so. And I think, it's all happened. The seal actually, trapped in the paint. The paint kind of become a medium to kind of connecting the seal and the canvas on the back together. So to me, it's kind of like a metaphor for is connecting the cultures, or connecting, between the past and the present, what you see here on the piece. And these, I consider as a constructions abstract. So to understand, the process of making it, you kind of understand the piece itself, and why the artist chose to use that materials, and how he making it. And so I sit in my studio and thinking, oh, these materials already get into very kind of like a final state of it. And I don't really want to use seals just as a surface to paint on, but instead taking up into more kind of like a 3D form of material. And so I remember, one time when I moved in here, I didn't speak any English, and I have to learn all that all over again. So one of my professors told me that if you want to learn a new language, you have to try to forget your own language and to relearn it again. And so I found that very inspired me from the point that learning a new language versus making a new artwork. So I started to kind of like cutting all these two pieces apart. It's the same piece of fabric, but they have been deconstructed so many times, and then I reconstruct them back on the canvas. Now I think it turned into something totally new, even though just a small action that you've done with the materials. And surprisingly, silk had keeping is kind of like quality, no matter how many times or how much you manipulate or how much you dye or how much paint you put into it. It still remains as is perfect material that it just react the same things as a piece of fabric. And that's also explain why every time I kind of like display on these painting, it turned out different. So you may see this painting in this location, and then I'm gonna install it in another locations. It can turn out totally different piece. And the idea of the material now it transformations and it left its evidence on the piece. And now it's also kind of like a margin occupied in the space itself. So it's kind of make sense to me, how my identity changes over time, and how I become for me today versus back then, and it's so my piece consider it's never been done until I install it permanently. So it's keep changing over time.
And Kenny, could you talk a little bit about how, we saw that video clip in the beginning of you manipulating the piece at Ragdale, but what are the sort of the criteria that you go through in your process to determine where it ends, where it begins, how it's hung, how that piece behind you, for instance, or even the other pieces that you have in your studio are going to look, ultimately at the end?
Right. So I currently have this piece on the back, and I want to show you guys just a quick tour of my studio. So it's just a garage bay, and I just put it on the wall up, and so I have a lot more piece in the back. Right. So there's a couple of pieces that I make in my previous residency in Iceland, and some of these are new piece, some of my flat work over there. And so, all of these pieces have been making on the floor. So it's on flat, and I need a floor space to work. So, is to be able to install that on the wall is completely different things. So I've been making this on the floor, let it dry for a certain amount of time. And then I start to kind of sculpt them back on the wall. So the whole idea of the installations is, I keep thinking back about my fashion career where, if a designer doing kind of like a fashion show, they're gonna be there in presence and present their work on the model. So, that's sort of kind of like have I think it's very powerful, whereas, you have an artwork and the artist have to present the work. And I think the artist is being more kind of like presentation in that way, if you have to kind of handle your work until it display unto the viewer. And I love the fact that I can make it directly on the gallery floor. So even now, sometimes, when the collectors or the gallery want to see my work, and I'm bringing my work to actual display to kind of like sculpt it on and let them see it. And I think one of the factors that I very love about this kind of work that it involves a lot of the artist's hand into it. And so, you know, the same ideas as if I think in the walls as a runways, and, you know, the walls is my model, and I start to kind of like sculpting these pieces on the wall exactly the way that I would sculpting around a body. So, you know, every fall and drip have been secured with kind of like small little push pin. And I keep changing it over time. So until I look at the composition, I look at the way that it's emerged to the wall, the way if it's gonna, you know, fit into the space, or sometimes, you know, I install at the corner of the gallery or up on the ceiling or either on the floor. And I just try to make it kind of like occupy in the environment as much as it can. So, you know, it's gonna draw people into that space. And so the part of the installation too, you know, just create the environment so when people walk into it, they're gonna see, you know, what they're gonna see, the effect from the piece itself.
You know, what's really fascinating to me about that whole process is that you talked about presence and your presence in the installation, and obviously you're involved in that. So you're taking away a lot of the sort of the traditional sense of, you know, just handing over your work to a gallerist or a museum or what have you, and having somebody else put it up. So how important is that to you for, you know, to you to let go of some of those opportunities to, you know, put that work up? Is it always going to be you, or are you willing to sacrifice some of those, you know, that ability to manipulate the work to the gallerist or the person who's installing the work?
Right. So that is also a challenge with the piece that I've been working with. For example, I have a collector who my gallery presentation, social gallery in Charlotte, that we saw a piece to El Salvador. And the collector, you know, I can't just go there to install the work. So we would make a kind of a video installations. So the people there can, you know, install by themselves. Actually, the method of installing it is very easy. It's just a push pin on the wall. But however, I think it's the involvement of what decide to be a final look of it is the most important thing, and is upon the artist.
To me, you know, the other really fascinating thing is the fact that the way they're positioned is like sort of a crumpled piece of fabric or cloth or even paper. And it's almost like a rebuttal or some kind of reaction to, you know, like that painting behind you that's flat, square, you know, kind of stretched out perfectly. It's almost like, I'm just gonna crumple it up and toss it. And it's not a disregard, but a reaction to kind of the traditions of what paintings are, you know, supposed to look like.
Right. And I think that's true because, you know, I've been making a lot of, you know, flat work and traditional style of work on a very rectangular surface. And to me, I just don't want to get into kind of like a normal, you know, making the same type of work all the time. And the fact is, as you say, you know, this piece maybe end up in a collector home or, you know, a gallery space, but then it's not even the final stage of it. It's gonna keep changing until the piece is gonna destroy. Because if you move to another location, you're gonna install it in a different way. So, you know, maybe there's not a final destination for this piece.
Right. Well, let's go back a little bit to talking about the cultural identity, you know, especially this idea of covering up silk. You talk a lot about the silk as the material, and obviously coming from an Asian country, that's sort of one of the traditions, but then you're covering it completely with this really thick, you know, obviously malleable surface or material that kind of negates the beautiful lightness and qualities of the silk. Is there a reason for all of that? Have you been considering those in the final execution of them, and how they're going to be understood and read by others?
Right. So I think the most important thing with the seal is it's only left is evidence, and by this mean, the evidence also is transformed into a different type of visual language. For example, when the seal is dry, it can create its own textures. And so, by manipulating, soaking in paint, and then putting back on the canvas, when the seal is dry, it's going to create its natural textures. And you see in a lot of my work, it's have kind of like a little sprinkle of texture, enough for you to see it's the fabric. So I think, no matter what I manipulate the material, it's going to leave it evidence. And this evidence become, is transformation into a visual language. For saying, the color gonna turn it different every time I can like dye the seals, or the evidence in the textures, or the evidence on, how these material been layering, and it's on show at the end of the piece.
I just wanted to share a couple of these other pieces that so people can take a look at them a little bit closer.
Yeah, so this particular piece, I think I made in Iceland, half them, and so I had to pack up everything when it's still wet, and this is the final look, finishing up in my studio.
So it didn't look like this when you packed it up.
Right. So there's a flash of paint, and when I get to my studio, it get everywhere on the camera. So I repaint them, and then, put some more details on it, and finally install it in my studio space. And some of these is the new work. So you can start to see, how the material been cutting. Some of them by very small straps, some are bigger strap. And some of them I dye into a very solid block of colors, and some that other is more like a marbling effect of the colors kind of bleaching through together. But I think at the end you see this as a whole is being constructed by different component of these materials, and with the different colors to create that color composition.
Could you talk a little bit more about the specific color palette and how? Obviously from here to here, and even this third one, the one that was right behind you, you're dealing with quite a range of colors.
Right.
Mix of those.
So, well, obviously the first bee when I met in Iceland during the winter time, so, inspires a lot from all the environment that's around my studio. So my studio kind of, on above the hill that's look over, you can see kind of like the sea over there, like frozen solid. And in Iceland, they have a lot of kind of like, these kind of ice. It doesn't have different kind of color because these soil and the volcanic soil is there. So I kind of like a little bit of that greenish, yellowish of the water frozen. Versus these. So I have a hard time to get back in my studio after the residency. And it felt like, I have all the energy there, but it's just going nowhere. So this piece kind of like a transformation of my energy during the time. I just want to make something more colorful and something have more energies. Something that's, it's just pop in the middle of the space. And I know we all going through a very tough time at this time. And it just, I think the color, it just dramatically changed. And it's you can see the effect of, how sensitive on the material as in us as an artist. And we all be impacted by all of that. And I think it's just, just making a dramatic change in my work, especially when the color.
Yeah, and was that a significant departure from your travels from Ragdale, of course, the Midwest of the United States, all the way to Iceland? I mean, you're just moving from one place to another, but still technically doing the same kind of work. So what kind of effect did that have? I mean, you talked a little bit about the sort of the dullness of the atmosphere over there in Iceland in the middle of winter. But,
yes. So I think that's a part of my job too, you know, to take myself to places to see how I react with that environment. And then I kind of get the inspiration to making this work. So, you know, every piece to me is kind of like whole memory with me when I'm in that space and kind of like, you know, how I should react to this situation.
right.
And link back to, you know, back then when I moved to here, a very, you know, different country than Vietnam. And I've been shocked of the cultural environment and, you know, everything surrounding me. For the fact that I couldn't communicate with anybody with my language back then. So this piece sort of kind of like a form of a communication that I want to put out to people, even though, you know, without the kind of language that's spoken, you still can see and you still can like communicate it with it. So I keep challenging myself to go to the place that I'm not familiar with and just, you know, get that kind of shocking environment and start to get the inspiration to making these work. But for the fact that out of 12 months or years, I would travel about 4 or 5 months in total, which is, you know, also weird for me to have time here during the summertime in my home studio in my garage and making a bunch of work, and it just dramatically changed in terms of colors and some of shape. And I think that's a kind of, I take it as a positive side of the pandemic.
Yeah. And going back to this idea of travel and the change of the environment, I think you said when we had talked in the studio, you were 19 years old or something like that when you moved to the States?
Yes, when I was only 19.
Oh, and you didn't speak the language, and I'm just curious to know, you know, what type of, I mean, I guess what were you thinking about enrolling in another art program and, you know, dealing with this particular type of work in a foreign country, in a place that you were unfamiliar with? Like how brave was that? How much courage did that take to, you know, go through that whole process?
Right. So I think the most uncomfortable feeling is you feel like you're very isolated, almost become homeless, you know, even though you live in a house with your families. So the idea is that you not belong here, or even back then, if I go back to Vietnam, I probably not feel I belong there either. So the state when you're in between, you know, you couldn't go here or there, you couldn't do this or that, is, you know, kind of like art to become a kind of like a way out for me, to just, you know, I sit in my apartment and just start just random paintings. And I think that's true, that if you're not, you know, be able to communicate in one form, it's gonna just get out in the other forms. And to me, art is function in that way. And so I given up about 2 or 3 years to working at the nail salon for one of my cousins. And then I decided to go back to school to be able to do, you know, what I dreamed to do, to be an artist. And I'm glad I did, because, you know, it brings out a lot of things that it doesn't make sense to me before, but an artist, and, you know, you keep exploring what it really means to you, and you make it by making all these work and, you know, doing research and kind of like a self-reflections. It's just bringing out more and more, you know, what I have been understand, you know, why it's being this way, but not that way. And to me, you know, by reading a lot of, you know, kind of like, there's a thing that people talking about, the designer versus an artist. When I decided to choose being a fire artist, but not a fashion designer. So with fashions, you're called to have a long way followed by trend. You know, in this year you already have to have a collection for the next following years, and it just the routine is much faster and it's moving nonstop. Versus an artist that you have time to sit in a studio and you have time to reflect on what you do. And that's all for yourself. It's not about the productions. It's not about the final artwork. It's not about, other people, but foremost it's about you. So, I learned to love myself and my families and the idea that, put in the artwork. And I think by, be able to be an artist, I keep challenging myself to, to experiment with all of that. And I think I wrote a lot on that.
Great. We do have time for some questions. And I do have a question from Bernard here. So he's interested in the way you worked as a designer of fashion, its relationship with the work that we're looking at, and whether you're interested in live performance.
Yes, I actually have a couple projects in progress that I work with my, other friend who being a fashion designer. And we're thinking about making kind of like wearable sculpture, which is gonna involve some of the performance with it. But it's still in process of working. But I don't want to take away a lot from the fact that it's a piece of sculptural, piece of artwork itself. But yes, that's a very interesting idea, and I'm working on it.
Anybody else? While people are coming up with other questions, I do want to ask you, Kenny, specifically, since this is probably going to be viewed by a lot of younger artists and students we work with in schools, what type of, not just advice, but what sort of considerations do you think are important as someone who's not really sure about careers in the arts, or pursuing maybe something that they just see as completely foreign to them, and what role or importance that might have in studying at their particular age?
I think you just have to have a passion to it, because to me, art, when I decide to go with art, it's just a life career. There's really a moment up and down, even in my short-term career now. Sometimes you're making tons of work and it's sitting in your studio and it doesn't go anywhere. But I think there's opportunity out there if you just need to look at them. And the fact that I've been applied for so many residency before I get into ones, and then the door just keep open up for me, which is I'm very appreciate that. I think you just have to be a little bit brave and just go out of the box a little bit. Because by the time I decided to go back to art school, and my mom very surprised and she asked me, do you even understand, what you learn in class, or, because I don't have a good English, like grammars and everything back then, and she just can't believe that I make it to college. And, I just never doubt myself, because I think when you set up a solid goal and you follow it, and you should be patient with it, you're gonna make it one day. And it's all matter of just time. And also, the passion that you put into your art that have to have into a kind of like a solid goal. It's also mean like, you're making this art is for yourself. It's not for somebody else. I'm not chasing this type of art because I know a lot of people are gonna like it, or I know a lot of people are gonna buy it. But foremost, I think it's for me to kind of like explain myself and just, just put it out just for myself first. And if you feel like you're satisfied with that, it's gonna keep you in a long way to making more artwork.
Yeah, it's fascinating that, that barrier of the language that you keep mentioning, and something that your mother was kind of concerned and worried about you succeeding. Art was the one thing that allows you to kind of keep moving forward. So in essence, art was the thing that you needed and was the thing that, I don't know, went above and beyond all of the other traditional career choices that people think you need to pursue. What other things are you working on right now? What will be seeing for the rest of the summer during this quarantine?
Well, so I'm planning to have some just virtual show right now. Just getting ready for some of the other upcoming show, which is tentative. So I don't know if it's gonna happen or not. During that time, well, I've done a lot of also the research. Maybe I can share with you guys. I wrote it down right here. Just the research about the silk, the material, and these facts that I know. Maybe some of you know, some of you don't. So I'll go ahead and share it with you guys.
Great.
So there's just 5 facts that I think is so fascinating about silk. So first of all, the silk fiber is the one strongest fiber in the world. And it's sometimes it's explained about these people thought that silk is very delicate, very kind of thin material, but actually very strong. And so back in the day in Vietnam, silk used a type of currency. So it's talking about the value of silk in societies, and also is associated with a higher class people back then. One of the methods that been making silk has been discovered over 5,000 years ago in China, and silk was invented before paper, and the method of making silk hadn't been changed since then. So right when it invention, I think silk is getting to a perfection state of material that no matter what you do to it, it's just not have been changed for a long time. And there's one of very famous black silk in Vietnam, and actually it's very expensive and very hard to make. It's just been dyed from a fruit plant that grows in specific that region. So they get picking the fruit and they making a dye, and they dip and dry the silk for more than 100 times for it to get into that black silky colors. So that's and it's very close to where I lived back then in Vietnam. And actually, and also these this is a very very interesting one. So the traditional Vietnamese undergarment for women, which is called áo yếm, is just like woman bra, have been worn by every Vietnamese woman across all classes. So usually this is rare because usually silk is associated with high class people. But by making it as an undergarment, and you can see how popular it is silk back then in Vietnamese cultures. Every single woman had worn it. And I think it become popular because they wear multi-layer, and this layer never been shown. So it's happened is during the research back, every single woman it just have this kind of very important object to them is that would be an undergarment making from silk.
Amazing. That's wonderful, Kenny. Thank you so much. There's one other question. How expensive is silk there? Or
so,
is it there?
Yes. So this is talking about production. So silk become very popular. It's become, you can shop everywhere on the street. They're making souvenir with silk. Very, very popular in Vietnam. However, you can't find 100% silk until you get into that traditional making fabric. So most of the time, it's just like a production replicate of what silk. But to get into the original source of the silk, you have to go to these traditional village. They stay very small. They don't make it to the public, so they just make it by the order of a fashion design companies or something. And so even the silk that I use here is from China. So it's a type of silk from China and Japan. and also popular in Vietnam now. But I don't think it's that expensive anymore back in the country, unless it have to be a very authentic silk. And a fun fact about silk, they just make it so to know if it's really silk or not, they never make a very large silk piece. So most of them, the traditional loom, it just stuff is kind of like 1 yard, so it's just about this much. And that's definitely, you know, an original silk. So, you know, it just fit in for you to make very kind of like small garment. Even if you want to, you know, make an dress or something, you have to connect some of these silk together into one big piece of fabric.
Do you make paper, by the way? It's another question.
I have not. So I learned about the traditional paper making when I was in art school in Vietnam, but I don't use a lot of papers work.
Which leads me to the other question is, you know, what's next with material? I mean, is it always going to be silk? Is it going to change into cotton duck canvas? Is it going to, you know, move into something a little bit closer to paper?
So well, it's definitely gonna be silk because I think the material that holds so much of the meaning for me. I try a different material, but it's just, you know, a technical issue. It's not react just like silk, and because it's have a specific kind of way of react when I dye it or I soak it into paint. So it's hard to change the methods into a different like cotton or like, you know, rayon or something like that. And so I have been testing a lot with all other materials, but most of them stay as studies. Just only this work that make into actual artwork, it's just only been made by silk.
That's great. Well, I wish everybody could have seen, actually I took some footage, so maybe our edited version will share some of those clips that you demonstrated the actual process of you dipping the strips of silk into the paint and then applying them together. But thank you, Kenny. We're out of time and we're gonna have to close it up, but we very much appreciate you being here and spending some time and sharing some of your fabulous work with us. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Regent. Thank you, Sam, and thank you for all you joining here today. I see so many familiar faces, so thank you so much.
Thanks, Kenny.
Thanks, Kenny.
And thanks everyone for your time and attention. I hope you enjoyed today's Creative POV Artist Talk.